To our beloved audience who are participating today, thank you so much, first of all. This is the beginning. We'd like you to stay tuned, not only for this panel, but also for the remaining panel, for the day and for tomorrow, and then after tomorrow. Now, I would take the opportunity to have Clive, if he's still on, Greg Plum, Enock, Beren, Ala, Lawrence, Peter, all to join us, please, here now. Eden, for sure you've joined, thank you. Whenever you are muted, we'll be starting by the question to Clive Mendes. Leadership is a word that is in every other post today on social media and in every other training firm and every course that we are encountering online and offline. But genuinely speaking, to me, it was one of the toughest experiences ever to be able to delegate to others. And I think we all agree here, being business owners and running groups, that once you want to perfect something, when you delegate it, the sensitivity and the fragility comes in. How would you recommend for today's growing leadership group around the world with the giant resignation that's happening? What do you say to them?
Actually, what you've mentioned something, Omar, it's really interesting. What is leadership, and is everybody capable of it? It's a very, very difficult question in many respects, because there is a kind of traditional view of what a leader looks like. It's, you know, a tall person who kind of is very commanding and full of charisma. But in fact, some very, very effective leaders are nothing like that. I think the first thing that I would recommend to anyone is really to understand their own type of leadership profile. And that can, you know, it's very important to understand yourself before you can start motivating other people and getting them to do it. Now, some people do this extremely naturally, but for other people, it's far more difficult. So if you can start understanding how you are, then this is a big help. I mean, a very simple definition might be a difference between, say, an extrovert and an introvert. And that's one of the most obvious ones that you will notice. For most introverts, talking to people directly can be very, very difficult to do. Whereas for an extrovert, that might seem much, much easier. But I think there's, without going into a whole lot of background on these things, you've got people with different characteristics. For example, you do have people who are natural innovators. That's the way they are built, and they're very, very good at that. You also find some people who are natural organizers, and so people have different kind of characters and characteristics and facets of leadership. And I think understanding that, and then understanding how your team also work is very, very important. Let's just look at a couple of caveats to the leadership question. And one of those is about who cannot be a particularly good leader. And I have to say this, there are certain, shall we say, people with a more sociopathic kind of nature are a nightmare to lead companies. There's very little that can be done about that. And if you're stuck in that situation, you're probably as well getting out of it. There's also, to balance the question of leadership, there's an idea of followership. I don't know how many of you come across this idea of followership, but I suppose subtly it means that leadership has to be flexible. There are times when the leader is not going to know everything. So that the team and this commitment, I think it was Lawrence was also talking about this idea of people being bought in. That is what will help to sustain the business. So the leader takes risks, but his followers or her followers are the ones that allow them to take those risks. They compensate for that. So that's something to bear in mind. And I think I would just end with one final element on the question of leadership, and that is of betrayal. A leader will almost always get betrayed. So the leader must be prepared for that. It's not a personal thing, but people will lose confidence in you and your mission at some point. So it's a kind of maturity and experience that comes with that. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, that's pretty very insightful. Been Gandhi, having been in the tech world for quite a very long time and with a lot of indulgence in managing groups, when you take leadership into technology, what do you think the commandments are in few lines for a leader?
I think to the point Clive was mentioning, I think empathy is one of the key traits that is required for any kind of leader, and kind of getting in the trenches with your team. That is key trait. Other thing, which is like unless and until you do, you don't really understand. So sometimes leaders are kind of managing from the seventh heaven, like, hey, this is what I'm doing. No, that's not going to work. You have to get in the trenches with your team, understand the real things by putting your boots on the ground. So I think those are the couple of traits I would like to emphasize here, in addition to what Clive mentioned.
Thank you so much. Today, the world is changing very fast. We cannot grasp the happenings. Nobody can have the eye enough to grasp everything happening around the world. Ala Dalgan, what would make you be ahead of the curve with a strategic eye towards the macro essentials to lead a successful business today?
Well, I think that you have, especially if we're all coming from a technology background and we tend to default to technology first approach, we have to always remind ourselves that business first and technology is only a tool to serve business purposes at the end. And that's what I do when I talk to my clients about digital transformation. And I always make sure to remind them that digital transformation is not a technology story. It's a story of business transformation. It's how to use technology tools to achieve business results. Whether it's reduction in OPEX, whether it's optimization in operation, whether it's a new revenue stream, or my preferred objective, which is creating new and innovative business models. I think it might have become a cliche, but a very welcome cliche to say, you gotta disrupt, you gotta keep innovating, you gotta disrupt or be disrupted, because as one of the writers I attended a speech for last year in one of those conferences said, digital Darwinism is unkind to those who wait.
Thank you so much, Hala. Well, I thought that could be a tough question. Very easy for you, as usual. And coming today from community building, Industry 4.0, we are today under the title of orchestrating technologies in business. A dilemma that is inevitable. And it is like you have to walk in through that gate. Understanding how the shape of your business is and how it's gonna be. What is the infrastructure? What are the components? How are you going to sync your partners, your supply chain, your resources, and the setup, the integration, future-proofing, the manpower, the training, the growth, and the vision. a lot of different terminologies, a lot of different words come in within the scene. Looking from the Far East towards the world. Lawrence, what is your take today on orchestrating technologies in business?
Yeah, thanks, Omar. I think if we look at the post-World War, the world was very fixated about mass production, scaling up, globalization. We had a whole trade infrastructure, all fine and good. You can build your business literally on a checklist. Then you come to the late 90s and then the early 2000s, where there was an exponential, and I think mobile technology has allowed such great accessibility. You have the media platforms, you have the likes of Google, Facebook, and they reshaped the way we connected with one another. Then you realize you no longer can run and build your business based on that bloody checklist. You have to start rethinking about your sequence, and the sequence is very important, right? And the formulaic sequence is who is able to galvanize talent faster, quicker, the best and the brightest. That is going to be the #1 challenge. You can say whatever you want. I have plenty of money. I have, whatever. Yeah, the biggest country. But if you cannot galvanize talent, you are in big trouble. I mean, look at China. China has grown exponentially. But now with the recent curbs on technology, the big question mark is, how will China power on without the access to talent? It's a huge problem, even though they have 1.3 billion people, right? Because at the end of the day, it's the ability to galvanize global talent, that diversity. So whoever can command that. In the Chinese, there's a Chinese saying, if you want to win the war, you must have the mandate of heaven. That means heaven must bless you. Heaven must bless you with the cause to win the war, and heaven must bless you with the talent to fight to win the war, right? So yeah. All businesses have to be able to bear in mind that it's no longer about checklists, it's about the formula, it's about cost, it's about creative trust, and it's about you having that creative vision, right? To pave the way forward. So I think that's absolutely critical, not a checklist, but that formula to drive business. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Now, Biren, you have featured, as we mentioned, milestones within the innovation world and the technology world. And you are preparing for one yourself. Is there a pattern that you can read through today?
Omar, are you asking me?
Yes, pardon me.
Okay,
you might have lost it for a second.
Yeah, I think I lost the audio for a second.
Is there a pattern of the evolution of those game-changing intervals that you can conclude today, or you can speculate for the future?
No, not really. I don't believe, like, if anybody had crystal ball, the world would be very different. We are basically kind of looking from inside out on all the innovations as they're happening. We are always in the middle of these transformations as they are happening. It's very, very difficult, practically impossible to look ahead, like what's coming, and then appropriately, obviously, place your bets. Just like Lawrence highlighted, the COVID scenario, for example, like black swan moment. It never happened in the past, so nobody could have predicted those things. This technology transformations are also like that. So there is not a path that you can clearly see, like what to do. But my favorite example that I'd like to quote is like when you are traveling in car, if you want to go 500 miles away, you don't need a headlight that shows you the path 500 miles. As long as it shows you like 50 feet ahead of you, you're good. You start driving and 50 feet and then another 50 feet, and you keep on moving along the way and you'll reach the journey of 500 miles. So pretty much the same paradigm exists in the technology and business world. You have some limited visibility about the future, and you make all your decisions based on those, and the path will carve out itself. As long as your localized decisions are along the right path, the global decision will most likely end up in the right place.
Let me give you now a similar example here. 20 years back, we used to have like 4 hits of songs per year. Today, we have like 4 hits every single day, but we don't have the song. Do you think we're going into the same gray zone with innovation, Peter Clement?
Yes, I think I agree with you, Omar. I think it will never be the innovation that changes the world. Yeah, I mean, we can see if we look at business solutions, and we had some of the speakers listing these long lists of technology. And if you think from a business perspective, it's usually a combination of different technologies. Yeah, and not only one. It's not only IoT or only AI or blockchain. More often, it's actually a combination of many of these innovations. So I think there will not be the innovation of the month, so to speak, or of the year that changes the world. And different industries, different countries, at different stages of development need different technologies in general. And it just comes back to one thing that Björn also said, and some of the other speakers. I think no, there's no crystal ball, but I think it's important to consider your perspective. If you are a commercial business and you want to use technology innovation to differentiate yourself on the market, you can actually look ahead, because once you worked in the academic space, in R&D, in the research labs, you know that technology does not come up suddenly every month. It takes a long, long, long time. So the thing is, you need to go out there where the research in technology happens and spot these opportunities very early on, and not only marvel around the technology, but think about the implication for industries and businesses.
Yeah.
That's my take.
Yeah, thank you. I believe we do have to segregate between tech adoption and innovation. And this might be a transition phase for a lot of communities or governments or companies out there around the world. And we might be able to discuss that later on. Ala Dalghan, I mean, before I move into sustainability and building relationships and single malt with Eden, Ala is a fan of single malt too, from what I know. Ala, you have seen visions set in different parts of the world. 2030 Saudi Arabia, 2020 UAE, I guess, and other visions in other different countries around the world. Do you think that relates to what Lawrence was saying in governing talents? Does it play an important role in governing talents? And as we see nations losing talents to other attractive markets, what can we do, and what do you recommend on that level for governments?
Absolutely. The competition, the next frontier of competition is not going to happen around just resources, natural resources. It's going to be a battle for human resources, for talent resources. We see this as a small microcosm in the competition, the local healthy competition that we find between the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and the other GCC countries, but especially between those two. But we also see it everywhere. We see it between different cities in the US. We see a big migration from San Francisco to Miami and Austin and other cities. The big fight and the big battle will be the battle to attract talent. And I totally agree with Lawrence when he said galvanizing talent. One of the things that Dubai, where I live and work for 16 years now, what they do really, really well is they make it very easy for innovators, for talented people to come and create and build and innovate and network and meet other people who are equally passionate about creating and building and innovating. And I think this is why they will be ahead of the competition. And this is why they will be successful in building the next digital economy. And Eden, I'm a big fan of the magic liquid that your people invented.
We're gonna come to single month later, and you might share a photo of your library. So basically, today we have startups on board, we have governments on board, we have investors on board, and tech experts and industry experts on board. And the world needs more. I actually had a speech prepared, but I will not be presenting it today, just to make sure that everybody is on time. But I want to ask you a question today. The world needs the SDGs. And we see a lot of imbalance between what is claimed to be achieved and what needs to be achieved. I would like to ask Eden, as a non-tech guy, what do you think you need from technology?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we do.
Oh, perfect. Okay. Well, it's ever changing, isn't it? It's like, so our business, MHS, is a luxury transportation provider. And, you know, of course, as the business started, it was regionalized. And then, of course, with the use of the technology, we've been able to expand on a global level. The technology is there. It's a fantastic way to, you know, unite businesses, B2B or you know, business to consumer. But at the end of the day, for our business, it's the personal touch, it's the human involvement, which is very important. Technology to me is a little bit overwhelming sometimes because, I mean, there's so much, and you know, for me, there's things that you're doing with Zoom that you know I haven't quite figured out yet, or you know, it's about how to use. It's the time it takes to understand the methodology and the application of technology.
Yeah.
Is my biggest challenge. I know the technology is out there. I mean, I don't think there's very few limitations into what we can actually do and achieve at this point. It's kind of like building relationships in a way. It's like we need to educate ourselves and understand that we are going to waste a little bit of time figuring things out. We're going to waste a little bit of time understanding what technology we can actually embrace and use and what would be very beneficial. I don't doubt for a second there is technology out there that most of you understand that would absolutely change the parameters of my daily life.
Indeed. Pardon me for interrupting here, Eden. This is one of the main reasons that we have stated on our objectives from holding BITS conference, which is simplifying communication and bridging the gap of knowledge between business owners, even at all scales. Because without CDOs and CIOs, I mean, business owners can't understand business technology, right? So we need to bridge that communication. I know a lot of you have faced that already along your journeys, and even in branding, Lawrence, when you want to explain the value of a brand to a client, how important is that? But now, I know that we can speak a lot. And I have to highlight something now about the SDG, Enock. And gle, I know that you are on cruise. And I know you're missing out on a lot of fun out there. And people need you. So you'll be staying tuned with us for a bit. We'll hold a Q&A hopefully, and then we'll jump directly onto your unpickable show and not just speech, and how you incorporated that in the corporate world. Wow. Let's do that right after Enock tells us Enock, the same thing. SDG. People sometimes get sick and tired from hearing titles. But having less action. And for that, there's a major issue here that everybody misses out on, that the public is unaware of what SDG stands for. It's a niche of startups and incubators and governments and companies who are early on with sustainability that understands that. And it's a cultural change. It's not only a corporate change. It's not just a global term that to be used. What would you do to bridge that gap?
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of the Sustainable Development Goals, again, most business are not aware, but I think if you start from any business leader looking at what is the impact, once the business starts to look at what is the business impact, so is it a social impact on the people, employees, supply chain, what's the impact on the environment and the economic impact as well. And once you start to look at the impact, you start to identify the various areas that can help with the Sustainable Development Goals. Again, you can look at the culture, the vision of the business. I think Lawrence mentioned about the cause, which was I was very happy, about the cause. Now, you can look at iPhone, it's not what they do, but why they do it, so identifying the cause as a business, you can then spread into the vision and other areas. But I think impact is one of the key things where, for example, the B Corporation is an organization that has been able to show that any business that has a good economic impact can also have environmental and social, impact. So having a good social and environmental impact is not a detriment to actually the business succeeding economically. But again, it's more about highlighting these. So I think start off from the impact, and as Byron mentioned, once you start from the impact, you may not see the 500-mile journey, but you start to see 10 miles as you go along, then you start to realize that. So I think, one of the key things that I'm very passionate about is to let business know that sustainability and the SDG is not just some big terms out there. There is evidence by, for example, apart from the vehicle, there is the business of fashion, which I've also shown as well. Yeah.
We might need to get on a chat, Enock, as well, in how to democratize knowledge about SDGs finally, and bring it to the household, bring it to people. I mean, bring it to school, to grade 1, and not just being there on titles on news. So thank you so much, Enock. Gentlemen, to conclude something about today. Number 1, such chats need to be longer. Number 2, from each of your input now, a lot have heard us today. We are here to initiate something. We are here to initiate a conversation and to connect. I invite you all to check the chat, please, all the attendees and the audience as well. See the links of our speakers. Connect with your value context that you have to pitch in. We're all ready to listen. We're all ready to share experience and resources and grow. In such a collaborative environment, this is how we strive